now remembering to hit the record button. We are going to record these sessions to make sure that they are available for you to share with your staff or share out as you need to, and everyone will have an opportunity to share. We are going to be using the chat feature of this Zoom webinar so that we can make this as interactive as possible. So in addition to the chat, we will be launching some polls. So my colleague, April, just put in the chat box. Please introduce yourself using the chat box with your name, your organization, and your title, just so that we can have an idea as to who is on the webinar today. As I mentioned, for those that just joined, we do have everybody muted to start. So we'll be using this chat box as an opportunity to introduce ourselves and talk with one another. So we are going to, welcome everybody. We have quite a variety of folks joining us here today. Use this chat feature as a way to ask questions as Lisa is giving her presentation. April and I will be tracking the chat box, and Lisa has built in time after each slide to answer any questions that you have per that slide, and then we've also included a question and answer period at the end. So we are going to launch our first poll. Now that we've had a chance to introduce everyone. And the first poll is just to get you started to think, like, how present are you able to be today for this webinar? Understanding that there is a lot going on and we are having to balance multiple priorities, but wanted to just touch base with folks, see how you're feeling, and that way we can provide some flexibility as needed as well. So it looks like folks are really excited about this webinar, which is really exciting for us, and that there might be a few times where folks are going to have to step away for phone calls or emails, but looks like the majority of folks are set and ready to go. So let's get this started so that we leave as much opportunity for you guys to interact and ask questions as possible. So I'm going to introduce Lisa Runkel, our Philanthropy Manager, who will go over the 5 best ways to stay connected with supporters in the middle of this crisis. And just a reminder, please use the chat box to provide any questions that you have, and we will post them to Lisa as possible. Lisa, I'm going to turn the remote control options over to you so you have the ability to change your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brenna, for the kind introduction. And I just want to pause and say thank you to all of you for joining us today. We know that nonprofits are feeling this crisis in many different ways, and most of you are likely joining us from shelter in place at home, and that brings an entirely different set of dynamics with it. So I just want to say thank you and show our gratitude for you joining us today. I know there's a lot of webinars being offered right now, and my goal today is to coalesce some of that information that I've gathered and really encourage you to connect with your supporters during this time. And Brenna, I'm not sure if I know how to advance the slides. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, I certainly can. Hold on,
Thank
let me
you.
keep the...
So we're gonna dive right in. The first tip I want to share with you today is to show empathy. We're all working in the nonprofit sector because we feel a passion for the work that we're doing, and it's time to project all of that empathy and emotion and passion to our supporters. So be empathetic. Also recognize that this crisis is affecting everyone very differently. I've had so many conversations with donors and board members over the last week, And while many are feeling, different emotions and financial crunch and all sorts of different things, let's not project our own feelings onto those conversations. In some cases, I've had conversations with folks where they're somewhat untouched in terms of how this impacts their day-to-day life. And so let's be empathetic, but let's also not assume anything when we are reaching out to communicate with those audiences. Acknowledge that this is an unprecedented time. One of the questions we received prior to this webinar was the comparison or the projected comparison between what we're experiencing now and the downturn in 2008, 2009. And I would argue that there's no comparison, that what we're living in right now is history in the making, and there's no roadmap for this. So just acknowledge that as you're communicating with your supporters and with your board. These are this is uncharted territory and unprecedented time. Communicate compassionately. Brenna, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to show an example of what River Network sent recently from our CEO, Nicole Silk. We sent this to every single donor in our database, and the email goes on to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our organization, but you're looking at the first paragraph of what we said. We really wanted to set the tone with this email, knowing that folks' emails are flooded right now, whether it's a restaurant you ate at one time or a subscription you didn't even know that you were subscribed to. We're being inundated with these messages. And so we really wanted to distinguish River Network from some of those messages and really check in and show this empathetic tone and encourage folks to find solace and comfort in nature, and to really ask and check in with how people are doing. And again, this resource will be available after this webinar today if you're not grabbing this currently, but I just wanted to show this as an example of how we are showing empathy and leading with empathy during this time. Any questions before we shift to the second point? Great.
That doesn't look like it.
Wonderful. So tip number 2, offer community. I've read a few questions and seen a few things online where organizations or nonprofit employees are questioning, am I essential right now? I'm not on the front line fighting this battle. I don't feel like we should be communicating right now. And I would argue that no nonprofit is non-essential, or you wouldn't exist. Leave that up to your supporters who are passionate about your work, and ask them to join in your community. What community does your organization provide right now? If you don't have that, what community can you provide to your supporters, to your board members, to the people that you're serving? We're all in this together. We are all craving community and connection right now. How can you provide that value to your community and to your supporters? And I would challenge you, if you don't know the answer to that question, to think about that, to gather your leadership team, to gather your board, and really think about how you can provide value to your community and to your supporters right now. Let me give you an example of how River Network identified one way that we can offer community during this crisis. I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, we offered the community via a listserv focused on drinking water and convening all sorts of different groups and people to fight and halt water shutoffs and restore access during this pandemic. And that listserv is robust and has community happening daily, engagement and different collaborations going on. So that's just one example that we've found on how we're providing value and community during this time.
And then I believe, Lisa, we wanted to ask our participants in the chat box how are they talking about value that they're providing to their community and their network right now?
Absolutely. We would love to see that. If you have examples of how you're providing that value in community, please drop that in the chat. And again, you know, that should be relevant to your mission. We're not suggesting that you do something that's not mission related, but what relates to your mission that you can provide of value or for your community during this time. And like I mentioned, you know, ours is a listserv. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift or a creation of something new, but I'm guessing you all have something that you could provide to your supporters that would feel valuable during this time.
So yeah, if everyone wants to take an opportunity really quick to put into the chat box how you're talking about value within your organization or externally to your community and your membership. We'd love an opportunity to folks share ideas with one another on this roundtable. So please use the chat box to let us know what you're doing. And I think we have a poll too that we wanted to launch just to get a sense of how people are feeling about their fundraising efforts in this time. So if you could look on your screen about the question, how are you feeling about fundraising right now and meeting your goals? Results are
I love
coming
this.
in.
I want to share this example from the chat if Emily doesn't mind. She says, the Hudson River Water Alliance is providing our Zoom subscription to our local watershed partners so that they can provide, sorry, it cut off. So that they can continue to hold their meetings and programs online. We're also compiling photos of responsible social distancing along rivers and streams to emphasize the importance of clean water and open space. Wonderful. That's a perfect example. Looks like she gave us a link there if folks want to check that out as well. Emily, thanks for sharing.
And we have poll results, so it looks like folks are somewhat confident but becoming less confident by the day as this continues to go on. And then we're kind of split between folks being terrified or not confident at all that they're going to reach their fundraising goals and being somewhat confident. So Lisa, we've got some work to do today.
That's right. Well, I think the next slides will hopefully, the next points I have to make will hopefully help you increase that confidence. So let's keep going. Number 3, communicate clearly and concisely. As we mentioned, I'm sure you're all feeling this as well. Our inboxes are inundated right now with messages about COVID-19. So when we do communicate, we want to communicate clearly and concisely, be very succinct in our message, very to the point, simplify those messages. I would also recommend a communications audit. What this means is to go through your website or any auto communications that might be going out from your organization and just look at the language and kind of sit with it. One example of something that might be a little bit tone deaf right now would be something to the effect of, hope your 2020 is off to a great start. Or anything that sounds just kind of off in terms of the current times that we're living in. So do a quick communications audit. If you're the person in charge of communications for your organization, I would actually recommend that you have someone else do that for you, someone with fresh eyes. We actually had a board member send an email this morning just pointing out a word that we had used in some communication that just felt off considering the timing of everything. And so ask your board to help with that. Ask your leadership to do that if you're not the executive director on this call today, and just take a look at that communications. And that's across all platforms. I want to encourage you to communicate across all platforms right now. You should be updating your website. You should be communicating through social media. Obviously, email is very popular right now. So use all of those different platforms to get your message across. And we'll dive in a minute about what that communication should look like. But I want to encourage you to continue to communicate about your day-to-day work and your impact. Don't feel like you can't still share about your organization because of what's going on. Let your supporters decide what they want to digest in terms of information. It's up to you to offer the opportunity to provide those updates.
Lisa, we had another really great example posted in the chat box about a do-it-yourself muscle walk while also encouraging proper social distancing. That encourages folks to walk along the Flathead Lake and look for signs of invasive mussels, and doing an online science on tap. So those are two really great ideas. In addition to keeping an eye on COVID-19 policies that could impact the community and or local nonprofits in the area.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Brenda, if you want to go to the next slide, I just want to show an example of how we have integrated updates into our day-to-day communication. So you can see here on our website, we have added a bar that has our COVID-19 response. If you click on this as you're visiting our website, it will take you to all of the different resources and responses that we have coalesced in the last month or so during this time. So again, you know, continue your day-to-day, but weave this in as it makes sense and make sure you're communicating with your supporters. We were talking about this in preparation for the call, and just to kind of put a bow on this point about communicating, I think, you know, our response might be, or our go-to might be to plan and to stay internal and to try to, you know, focus on internal things right now. But I just, again, I want to challenge and encourage you that this is the time to communicate with those external partners, with your supporters, with your board, to check in. I know it can feel intimidating, and for some of you, I saw in the questions, it felt like, is this the right time? And again, I think if you weave all of these points in and do this in the right way, that now is the right time to be communicating with those folks. Let's move to number 4, Brenna, unless there are questions on any of that. We can pause and
we did get a couple of more ideas shared as to what folks are doing to serve as a resource. The Huron River Watershed Council launched a 50-50 challenge to pick up 50 pieces of trash or invasive species and post a picture to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Oh, I love that. They're also hosting virtual meetings with volunteers and converting some of what was going to be in-person events to virtual. Looks like we did have to cancel a D-Trash event, given that some county health officials didn't want folks picking up trash. Yeah, just a reminder, if you are going to do trash pickup, to encourage people to use COVID-19 standards and guidelines. So using gloves, washing your hands, and those picker-upper things, using those instead is also a really great idea. But they decided, the same group that had to cancel their trash event decided to turn it into an invasive species removal event. And so they've been encouraging folks to pull invasive species around their neighborhoods and on local land trust properties, which is also a really great, because the invasives are coming in right now, a really great way to get folks outdoors and help with some invasive species removal.
Hey, Brenda, would you like to launch the poll now and just sort of see how other people are doing around canceling fundraising events and what folks are doing right now with that?
Sure, we absolutely can. So we have a poll, thank you, April, asking, have you had to cancel any major fundraising events, or if you didn't have any scheduled currently, are you considering canceling a major fundraising event due to COVID-19? Looks like the vast majority of folks that have responded have had to or are in a position where they're still having to decide. Yep, go ahead, keep. All right, April closed the poll. So the question that we then have for folks that I know Lisa is going to get into, for those folks that have canceled or are still deciding, have you identified a plan B? And if so, what does that look like? So using the chat box, if you want to provide information about what your plan B is. So one example that we've already talked about is turning a trash event with concerns around picking up trash right now into an invasive species removal event. Or do you have other ideas as to what your plan B could look like, or that you're discussing that you would like to share with folks on our call? And April, thank you for putting that into the chat box. So what is your plan B if you had to cancel an event, or if you're deciding to cancel an event and looking at alternatives, what does that look like? So Lisa, as we're getting that, getting responses, if you want to cover number 4, we'll, after this slide, we'll let you know what the responses are.
Absolutely. And I want to encourage folks. I've seen a lot of creativity and innovation as people have moved from in-person events to online fundraising events. So, you know, don't be shy to take a peek at your neighbor and see what might be working for them. And again, we would love to see those best practices in the chat if we have those today. So number 4, share your good news and challenges. Again, this goes back to not projecting how, you know, we're feeling onto our donors. So let's stick with some good news and provide those silver linings in their inbox or on our social media platforms. What are those silver linings that your organization might be seeing? Maybe it is sharing how you are innovating and adapting different events or outreach during this time, and sharing that strategy with your supporters. But also feel free to be clear about the challenges that you're facing. I didn't show the entire email that we sent in mid-March from our CEO, but we did talk about challenges that staff were feeling, the challenge of moving River Rally from an in-person event to a virtual experience. We're very upfront about those challenges. Your supporters want to help you, so be clear about how they can help you right now. In that same email, we referenced several different ways for folks to help. Of course, one included donating to River Network, but we also encouraged them to host their own Facebook fundraiser, or to use River Network as the charity as they shop on Amazon.com. You know, offer that as an opportunity. Again, it's not up to us whether or not they'll take that opportunity, but it is up to us to be offering it for them. And it's okay to make them aware of loss in your organization. So maybe you have statistics already about the percentage decreased in funding, or perhaps you know the number that will be lost because you can't host the fundraising event that you plan to, or perhaps it's a decrease in the number of people that you are able to serve, or the conservation goals that you're able to achieve. If you have that data, go ahead and share that. Again, they want to hear how they can help. If they're in a position to help, they will. That's their choice. It's up to us to provide that those updates and those opportunities. And Brenna, if you want to quickly show the next slide, I just want to show an example of an email that went out to our supporters on Monday. This was kind of the beginning of the email, I believe in the good things coming. And we shared a quote from someone who had shared feedback for us on providing River Rally virtually, and how she felt that it would actually provide access to many more people. And so we shared that. And then go ahead to the next slide, Brenna. And then we went into the email and, you know, shared other updates about how we're mobilizing and innovating during this crisis. And then you can see here's our sample text that was actually at the very end of the email. We're still offering folks the chance to support our organization. And we're also recognizing that there are elevated needs across the country and the world, but that we still have a mission that we are upheld to, and that we must remain vigilant in our protection of rivers and waters during this time. So it doesn't have to be the focus of your communication, but I would strongly encourage you to still include it. Give people the opportunity to make that choice.
Thanks, Lisa. So we do have a couple of examples and a couple of questions. So questions related to online fundraising efforts for those organizations whose plan B was to take any events that they would normally do in person and take them virtually. So one example is raffles and auctions. Are there ways to convert that into a virtual or online experience? Folks are looking at hosting online fundraisers online, but then following up with a mail appeal. Some folks don't have a plan B. They've just had to postpone until the fall, hoping that things are better by then. So they are curious about what online fundraisers are successful, if we have any examples, and what those might look like.
I don't have specific examples in terms of what platform to use, but I will say I have seen at least 2 fundraisers in my local community here that have shifted to online and used an online silent auction tool to raise money that way. And there's 2 benefits to that. One, you're going to grab people who, for those events that might not be their scene. You know, there's some folks that they just don't enjoy attending those types of events. And so you can really promote the opportunity for them to give from their couch, to give from the comfort of their own home. And in some cases, I've seen that those platforms, those companies that are hosting those events have the bandwidth to actually help you promote that to a wider audience. So to folks outside of your current circle. And so I can do some research, some quick research on that, but I'm guessing you all could too with a quick Google search to see what those platforms are. But know that those opportunities exist and that I have seen several nonprofits do that successfully.
Lisa, we just had another really great idea come in from Allie. Allie, hope you don't mind me sharing. We had to cancel a smaller fundraiser, a guided fly fishing day. And we offered the attendees an option for a refund or to donate their admission fee to a fund that has a 1-to-1 match, and nearly every attendee donated their fees. So
yeah. I've seen that as well with these fundraising events, is to actually encourage folks to, you know, not ask for a refund for the ticket price and to let that be a donation to the organization. I'm also going to drop the full text of the email I just referenced into the chat box so folks can see that as well.
And then we also had someone that I know River Network has been providing as much resources as we can find about the payroll protection program. We would encourage our attendees, if you haven't already had the opportunity to look into the payroll protection program, to do that. As a nonprofit organization, if you have a small business administration approved bank and a relationship with them, reaching out to that local bank to see what your options are to keep your staff on payroll and to keep your offices going, your utilities and mortgage paid. That's a program to look into, and I know that Congress is looking to expand the stimulus package that included the payroll protection plan when they come back from their recess the beginning of May.
I see a question from Shannon that I would like to go to now, if that's okay. Shannon says, many of the financial supporters of Wabash River Fest annual summer festival are small, locally owned businesses. We had most of the funds committed for the festival before mid-March, but only 25% of the committee funds had been paid to us. I'm guessing that's committed funds. I'm looking for advice, insight to reach out to the rest of the committed, but not paid sponsors in a tasteful way to see if they can still support at the level they previously committed. You've provided a good framework to start the email phone call. I'm nervous about the final ask. So we do have some experience with this, Shannon, as we switched from an in-person river rally to a virtual river rally. We actually went through this exact same exercise. And let me just share really quickly about how we strategized that. And so we pulled together, you know, our leadership team and those folks that would be doing outreach. Maybe that's just you in this case. And so here's where, if you have a board member or a volunteer that you could team up with to help you strategize around this, it would be, I think, really beneficial. But we went line by line and really talked about the conditions of those sponsorships, each individually, and then provided, you know, a strategy on how we were going to communicate with those folks and exactly what we needed to say. So, and we did that to start with via email, and we also parsed out who was the best person to send that email. In some cases, it had to be our executive director. In other cases, it was another member of our staff. And when after we emailed, or during the email, communication, we actually asked for a follow-up phone call. So it wasn't just picking up the phone and kind of cold calling and have this conversation. We wanted to provide that context and give those sponsors time to, you know, check internally on what they might need to shore up before they could answer if they are still committed to sponsorship. And then we asked for a phone call for that next week. And I would say we probably ended up speaking one-on-one with about 25% of those sponsors. And we were able to secure even those that hadn't paid yet, all but just a few. And I do hear you on these small locally owned businesses. That's a very different demographic than who we were communicating with. But I think if you go back to the point I made in the beginning about speaking with empathy and recognizing what those small businesses are going through right now, and then again, line by line deciding, am I going to communicate to this one or am I going to let this one go? It needs to be a very individualized approach with each one of those. I hope that helps.
And Lisa, I personally have a follow-up question, if that's okay. If you're going to do that line by line, is there any benefit or something to consider in that individual outreach of, you know, we're in this together, we feel the pain, like, can we delay what the committed cost might be, like give folks until the end of the year per se, or is there any upside to providing a timeline, or do you think that that's not helpful either?
No, absolutely. I've seen a few suggestions around that in these different conversations is, you know, if you do have either an individual or corporate supporter or a small business supporter that's having a hard time paying their commitment, you know, would a longer pledge schedule help, or would, you know, delaying that payment help? I would definitely offer that if you're able. And again, it should be a very individualized approach depending on that specific business. And, you know, don't forget, you know, we talked about leading with empathy, but we also talked about being upfront and honest about the challenges that we're facing too. And so there's a balance in there. And again, that's where if you don't have someone in your organization, if you're a one-person shop, find a board member, find a volunteer, find a colleague, find someone on this chat. Find someone that you can bounce that off of. The best fundraising strategies are, in my opinion, created, you know, with someone else. They're not created in a vacuum. And so reach out to those resources to help, you know, bounce that language and those ideas off others.
Great.
Great questions. Okay. Should we move on?
Looks like.
So last but not least, this maybe should have been number one. This is an opportune time to steward and thank your donors. If all of these other things that I'm suggesting feel uncomfortable and give you heart palpitations in terms of reaching out, then just reach out and thank them. Double down right now on the opportunity to show your gratitude for your current supporters. I posted the link in the chat to the email that we recently received, and that was the, you know, overall theme of that email was to thank them for the impact that they're making with the gifts that they already made. Here's what we've been able to do during this crisis, thanks to your support, and give those examples of how you're mobilizing and how you're innovating and how you're responding because they've been your supporters. continue to share stories of impact. It doesn't have to be impact that's happening today. It can be a story that you've already told. Don't feel like you have to create all new communication pieces here. Is there a great story from the last 12 months that you want to remind them of? Share those stories as well. And I would highly encourage personal outreach. This again should be a one by one, a line by line. Who is the best person to reach out to this donor, to this staff, or excuse me, to this board member, or to this supporter? Is it a staff member? Is it your executive director? Is it your board? Is your board asking how they can help right now and you're not really sure how to mobilize them? Give them a list of 5 to 10 people if they're comfortable, and ask them to either pick up the phone and make a phone call, or to write a handwritten note. Can your executive director or the chair of your board do a quick thank you video on an iPhone? And can you text or email that out to your individual supporters just as a note to check in? Don't forget, we have supporters out there that are sheltering in place by themselves, and they're isolated, and they're, again, craving communication and community. And so what better way to have an excuse to reach out to them but to just call and say thank you with no other agenda? I would love, if we can, in the chat, I would love to know, if you're doing this, how are you supporting, expressing, and showing gratitude to your supporters during this time? Thank you, April, for getting that in the chat. If this is a practice that you've already enacted, we would love to hear examples of this. I'll tell you personally here, we've segmented our donors at River Network, and we're reaching out just to start with one by one to all of our major donors, with that message that I shared earlier of, we want to check in. How are you? Here's a quick snippet of what's going on here. We're feeling this as well. Here's how we've mobilized. Here's how we're innovating. Here's what we're excited about. And here's what we're challenged by. And again, make those personal, and just make communication and personal outreach a priority right now.
Yeah, so following up on April's question in the chat, if folks can share how you are showing or expressing gratitude, whether it's on social media, email, phone calls, personal notes. Anyone have great examples that they would like to share, or questions that they might have about how to show or express gratitude during this time?
Perfect. And while we wait for those, Brenna, if we want to just go to the last bit of information, and this is just this is more of a personal challenge than it is for your organization. Just don't forget, to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to talk about the things that you're challenged by, to be flexible. Many of us had fundraising plans for the entire year, whether you're in the middle of a fiscal year or you had just started. You might have to scrap some of those plans. You're going to have to be flexible during this time. Trust your gut. You're in the nonprofit sector, and you're working for your organization for a reason. You're there for a reason. You know your supporters, you know your board, you know your mission. Trust your gut in your communications. We're all human, and this is such an unprecedented time. So let's not forget to give ourselves grace. We're not going to be able to do all the things, and we might make some mistakes along the way, but I would like to hope that supporters of your organization are going to give you grace as well, and are going to just really appreciate any and all communication that you are offering for them at this time. So that's what I had for today. I just want to, again, just say thank you. Brenna and April are going to add some information, but I just wanted to, again, applaud you for taking time today, and that I hope this is just the start of this conversation.
Yeah, so we did have one person share that they are squeezing in personal contact where possible. about emailing and phone personal notes and thank yous coming in. It looks like there's another example that just popped up. Our fall event, Suds on the River, is supported fully by food donations from local restaurants and breweries. We created a series of social media posts encouraging people to order takeout or purchase gift cards from our supporting restaurants, and the restaurants really appreciated it. And I know that that's,
Love that.
yeah, I love that too. I know that that's happening a lot in Delaware right now, is that a lot of folks are working with the restaurants and breweries who are so generous with their donations or hosting events for us, taking this time to push people to do takeout orders for them. I wanted to allow a little bit of time for folks to ask any other additional questions of Lisa while they still can. I can unmute everybody if folks would like an opportunity to ask their question in person. So everyone right now, just FYI, has been unmuted. So if you want to mute yourself, mute yourself. And then if you wanted the opportunity to ask Lisa a question, feel free to speak up now and share your question.
Hey Lisa, this is Daryl in Atlanta. We do a lot of environmental education, and one of the things that we were trying to figure out, I mean, we've done some Facebook Live posts, but is there a way to maybe put out maybe more static lessons that could be interactive? And I guess how might we gauge participation? We're seeing that people are watching a Facebook post, for example, but you don't know how long people may be tuning in, and so you really can't ascertain, you know, if they're watching the whole lesson or are they watching for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So I mean, I guess I'm looking for maybe a better way to post content, maybe especially for youth, that we could actually get numbers from.
I can give a quick answer to that, and then Brenna, if you have anything to add, please jump in. I've seen folks shifting to an actual Facebook event versus the live, where you can actually have more of a back and forth conversation ahead of the live. So you could be posting, you know, different questions or contests or polls within, whether it's an event or a group, and then go live with, you know, whatever content you want to share in addition to that in that same forum. And so that creates a little bit more, I would say, back and forth engagement. And also, you know, depending on the day and the Facebook algorithm, may actually get your video in front of more people, because Facebook sees that engagement ahead of time and wants to put that in folks's, you know, timelines or news feeds. So that's one example that I've seen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually, one of my best friends is a youth educator for an environmental nonprofit in New York, and she created a YouTube channel where she's putting crafts up so that folks can do, like, build a owl pine cone and a firefly. And then she's asking people to post pictures of their completed projects with her social media handle, so she can see the reach of that. And she actually put out that she was low on supplies for some of the crafts because she's not able to get into her visitor center right now. And she had some people that were willing to send her some crafts to help and along with their ideas on what other craft projects they would like to do. So while she's waiting for those to come in, she's actually doing some tours outside of local spring ephemerals that are up so that people can see what they look like. And she's comparing them just with her cell phone camera, what the natives look like versus the invasives, and showing people how to properly remove invasives through how-to videos. So there's a lot of creative ideas out there that you can use, and YouTube seems to also be a great way to post, and then you can promote them afterwards because you'll have a link already.
Those help. Both of those ideas help. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Are there any
A great
other
question,
questions?
Daryl. Thank you.
Or other ideas that folks want to share while we have these last few minutes?
Brenna, this is April. One of the things that I was thinking about as Lisa was talking was just putting myself in the shoes of a donor and thinking about the charities that I personally support, and recognizing that for sure there are so many people right now that are suffering financially from job loss, and that there are people that are suffering from illness and sickness because of the virus. But also there are so many people out there right now that are just wanting to know how they can help. And when we think about everything from, sewing masks for people who need them, but also like thinking about what the things that we're afraid of losing, our favorite local restaurant or our favorite local business, and trying to think what we can do to help them survive this. And I also think about like the charities that are working to, feed people in our community and are working to keep our rivers and streams clean and trash picked up and all the things that I really value. And I want to, if I'm able to, I want to be able to do what I can to support them as well. So I really, Lisa, what you were saying really resonated with me about how to be very empathetic, because lots of people are in a very different place, but give people the opportunity to know how they can support you and how our organizations are being impacted at this time too, because people really do love us, all of us, the collective us and our organizations and the work they do, and want to see us pull through this time also.
Yeah, thank you for that, April. And that reminded me of something that we talked about in preparation for this call that I didn't say during the course of my presentation, which is, in the course of these one-on-one donor conversations that myself and our CEO have been having, for the most part, people are staying with their giving. I would say there's some statistic like 90% or 95% of folks give, major gifts through cash instead of other assets. And in some cases, their cash flow, while their 401ks and their stock market is not looking great right now, in some cases, they may have the cash flow to sustain those gifts. And so again, it's not up to us to assume any of that. It's up to us to provide the opportunity for them to be engaged in our organization. And I said this in the Facebook Live, but I didn't say this today. We exist to help people enact their own values. They are giving to us to enact the values and the passion that they have about our work. So this is no time to pull back on that. I'm not saying we need to be aggressive or overt in any of this, but please just don't feel bad about the work that you're doing if it's not frontline COVID response, because it still matters and it's still going to matter in a year. And so I just want to continue to encourage you to provide those opportunities and communications to your donors.
Yeah, and I know that we're getting ready to wrap up, but we did not anticipate today having breakout sessions, but we understand that fundraising and sharing ideas and connecting with one another is important to you. So we did want to see if we were to plan a kind of part B to this conversation that would allow more breakout sessions and you opportunities to interact with one another and connect with one another using this type of platform, if that would be of interest to you. So if you could take a minute to just indicate whether or not this kind of format, but an opportunity to not necessarily be presented at, but to ask questions of one another, to share ideas, and to brainstorm with one another would be of interest to you. Please fill out poll that should be on your computer screen right now. If you could. So it looks like we're split in that most people would want something like this again. And so for those that are registered today, we will send up a follow-up email if we're able to block out time where we can all be on the Zoom call together. And how that will work is we'll put you into breakout rooms and you'll have opportunities to talk about what issues are you facing? How is your messaging being received? How are you engaging your donors right now? And what issues are you having with online platforms or not? So appreciate the opportunity to kind of share this information. So I'm putting everyone back on mute to just quickly finish out this presentation. Thank you, Lisa and April, for helping us today, and Lisa providing all of this great information to our members and our network. Just a reminder that we wanted to include at the end for those that might have found this webinar or meeting from somewhere other than River Network. We have 2 more of these lunch/breakfast, depending on where you're joining us from, roundtables available. One that we are opening up specific to organizers. So if you have community organizers, outreach educators, and others in your team, we will be providing an online platform for them to get together where we will just be facilitating the conversation, but really allowing folks the opportunity to share what they're experiencing, where they're seeing some success, and an opportunity to learn from one another. The final one we'll have, and I know this is top of mind for many folks, is cybersecurity during COVID-19. We will have an IT person that will be joining us to go through what precautions that you can take to make sure that your online systems are as secure as possible for your team and for your community. To answer one of the questions that just came through, this has been recorded, so this will be available on our website and will be shared in our newsletters. And the one on cybersecurity will also be recorded. What we will likely do for the organizing remotely one is that we'll share any top level ideas that come out of that, but that's really more of an opportunity for folks to have discussions amongst one another. And then if you're not familiar with River Network, we are a membership-based organization helping watershed organizations across the country. And we are doing these 3 sessions in preparation of virtual rally. So if folks have had an opportunity to attend River Rally in the past, this year we are going virtual. So we hope that you will think about joining us. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email myself, April, or Lisa, and keep a lookout for any of these opportunities as they come forward. Thank you so much again for taking time out of your day to join us, and best of luck and be well.
Thank you.